If you hear children screaming in the background, it's because I live near an elementary school. They're fine, they're okay, it's just recess or lunch or whatever break time they have, so they're running around outside. They're okay, I promise. You know who's not okay though? Are the parents who have honking wars with each other in the mornings when they're dropping off their kids. Anyways, March. How was it for you guys? Was it a good month? I would give it an overall rating of 3 out of 10. That seems fine. In March, I read 6 books, or I should say I picked up 6 books because I only finished 5. One of them was a DNF, and Emma from Drinking by My Shelf does this fun thing for her wrap-ups where she balances the books, I think she calls it. So she tries to balance, I think it's the number of new books that she buys in that month with the number of books that she's read in a month. The goal is for it to balance out. I think doing that is a really good idea, and it's a good way of keeping yourself accountable from buying too many new books. But anyways, I got curious and I was like, I wonder how many new books that I bought in March. I'll show you. 5. So if I had to balance my shelf, I would come out with a net 0. Although I will say, A Ghost in the Throat, so I read this already and I saw this physical copy at a local bookstore and I had to have it. I freaking love this book with my entire heart and soul. I have a whole reading vlog dedicated to it, so if you want to go check that out, please do. If you want to pick this book up, please do. It's amazing. It's so good. I have so many quotes that I just throw at you in that video, so I'm not going to talk about it more here. I bought Worlds of Exile and Illusion by Ursula Le Guin, and this has 3 novels in it, so it's cursive. I cannot read this. I can't read cursive, especially when there are N's and U's. They just blur together. So it includes Rocannon's World, Planet of Exile, and City of Illusions. And these are the 3 complete novels of the Hainish series in 1 volume. I think she has other novellas or short stories set in the same sci-fi universe. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think The Left Hand of Darkness, or whatever that's called, I believe that's set in this universe, and maybe some other stories as well. I got this used for $7.50 and I thought it was a good deal. 3 books in 1 for 7.5 bucks. Not bad. I discovered this cool new used bookstore in my city and I picked up 2 books from there, only 2. And one of them is At the Lucky Hand by Goran Petrovic, and this is translated from the Serbian by Peter Agnon. So very cool cover. It's like that matte, slightly sandpapery sort of cover, which I really like. I believe this is a collection of short stories. No, sorry, I think it's one singular story. Goran Petrovic conjures up a captivating love story centered on the mythical theory of simultaneous reading, in which readers meet other people who are reading the same book at the same time, altering lives and loves forever. At the Lucky Hand is the winner of Serbia's highest literary award and a beloved best-selling novel published in more than 50 editions worldwide. It's one of a kind. It's a magical entryway into alternate dimensions and a glorious experiment highlighting the transcendence of reading. As you can see, very, very high praise for this book, and I thought it was a really interesting idea. And I've never read a book that's translated from Serbian before, so very cool. And this was used, even though it looks brand spanking new. Also used, and also a very cool cover, is 3 Apples Fell from the Sky. Isn't this? I saw this cover and I didn't even care what the contents of the book were gonna be. I just knew that I had to have it. It's such a cool freaking cover. I love the art so much. This is by Nareen Abgarian. It's the winner of the English Pen Award. It's also the winner of the Leo Tolstoy Yasnaya Poliana Award. So a lot of accolades. High in the Armenian mountains, villagers in the close-knit community of Moran bicker, gossip, and laugh. Their only connection to the outside world is an ancient telegraph wire and a perilous mountain road that even goats struggle to navigate. As they go about their daily lives, harvesting crops, making baklava, tidying houses, the villagers sustain one another through good times and bad. But sometimes a spark of romance is enough to turn life on its head, and a plot to bring 2 of Moran's most stubborn residents together soon gives the village something new to gossip about. This book is an enchanting fable, sparkling with sumptuous imagery, warm humor, and the irresistible joy of everyday friendship. Actually, right after I bought this, Jason, my partner, picked it up, and he's actually finished the book, and he said he liked it. But he did say it was like kind of depressing, which the synopsis doesn't give me that feeling. I feel like it's a very hopeful and uplifting book, but he said it was kind of depressing to him, so we'll see. But super excited. Okay, this next book I got brand spanking new, but I could not resist. The cover is so freaking gorgeous. Are you kidding me? Oh my god. The title's on the spine here. So these are the complete short stories by Clarice Lispector, who I believe is a Brazilian author. Now revised and expanded in paperback, here are the stories that made Clarice Lispector a Brazilian legend. In these pages, we meet teenagers coming into awareness of their sexual and artistic powers, humdrum housewives whose lives are shattered by unexpected epiphanies, old people who don't know what to do with themselves, and in their stories, Clarice takes us through their lives and hers and ours. I've been wanting to read Clarice Lispector for a long time, and I saw this cover, I saw this spine, and I couldn't help myself. This is brand new. How much was this? $22. And then the last book that I bought, I already talked about, is A Ghost in the Throat by Dora Negrifa. I struggle to describe this book every single time I talk about it to someone because it's half memoir but half an exploration of a female Irish poet. The poet's name is Eileen Dub Niconnell. She's a pretty famous Irish poet. And the author here, Dora Negrifa, she is fascinated with Eileen's life and she tries to figure out the details of her life. And through all the research that she does into Eileen Dub Niconnell's life, we kind of also see the author's life and her struggles with motherhood and self-identity. And this book is also about how female histories tend to be erased, female voices tend to be suppressed and forgotten, not passed down, things like that. Again, I have a whole video dedicated to this if you're curious. Anyways, sorry, I guess that was a mild tangent, completely not related to the books that I read in March. Let's get into that now, starting with We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This was a YA contemporary? Yes, YA contemporary. It's about Marin. She is, I think, a freshman in college, and in the beginning of the book, she is at her dorm, and her roommate is leaving for winter break, so Marin, that's how you say it, sorry. Marin is going to be alone in the dorm over winter break. The only kind of adult in her near vicinity is, I think, the janitor, who's, I don't know, kind of just there to make sure that she's okay and doing well. And also in the beginning of the book we know that Marin's childhood best friend, I forget her name, but it's also starting with an M, Mabel. So Mabel is coming to visit, and there's some sort of tension between Marin and Mabel, and we don't know what that tension is. The past and the present are interwoven in this book, as is the case in many fiction books that I've read. So it is dual timeline-ish, but it's not chronological. I don't know if that makes any sense. In the beginning-ish of the book, we find out that Marin's grandfather, who was the person who raised her, he's recently passed away. And we also get the sense that something happened between Marin and her grandfather before he passed away that caused a lot of tension between Marin and like everyone from her native town. So Marin is in New York in her college dorm, and she doesn't really want to go back to California because she wants to escape from whatever conflict, whatever issue occurred between her and her grandfather. And we don't know what that conflict is until the very end. The whole purpose of Mabel visiting Marin at her college dorm is to bring Marin back to California in an attempt to reconnect Marin with everyone that she's kind of left behind and is actively avoiding. This was a tough one to listen to. It's about loss and grief, memory and longing and betrayal, lots of commentary about loneliness, and there's a little bit at the end about found family, which was hopeful and uplifting. But overall, a very kind of somber book to read, to listen to. I picked it up because I wanted to feel something. Before this book, I had read a bunch of just mediocre, average books, and I wanted to feel intense emotion, and I wanted to cry. This book didn't make me cry, but it did make me feel very sad. But I thought I did a great job at depicting grief and how your family, how your friends can help you overcome grief, but sometimes you have to kind of struggle through that process alone for a little bit. So I liked how it depicted that whole grieving process. I thought it was a very empathetic book. Very heartfelt, very sincere, yeah. Then I read Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. Have a dedicated reading vlog for this video, so if you want to go check that out, it is somewhere. It's about the whirlwind, passionate romance between two young people. I think they're in their early 20s or mid 20s, and they are in London. So they meet, initially they meet and they become friends, and then they become more than friends, and then they become, or they get into a relationship. And it's about, yeah, they're just, you know, it's like love that's all-consuming, and you know it's right, and it's a little bit scary to dive into. This book is beautifully written. It reads almost like poetry at some points, and I said this in the vlog, but I'm gonna say it again here. I wish I listened to this being read out loud to me, because I feel like the words would have just flowed so beautifully. It's such a treat for the eyes, a feast for the eyes. So I would highly recommend reading it just for the prose. The contents were also great. It talks about love as this all-consuming, larger-than-life thing that transcends physical attraction, sexual attraction. It transcends all of that. It's like this deep, intimate understanding of another person. So that was nice to read about. And I feel like those portions of the book made me feel like I was watching a black and white, like, short film of some sort, where it's all vibes and all aesthetics. You know, there's no real plot in this book. It's mostly just about these two individuals and their experiences and them coming together, and what it means to kind of really connect with a person, to expose your intimate fears, your intimate desires, longings to them, and how scary that is. It's kind of like, you know, diving into open water in that sense. This book also explores masculinity, black trauma, racism, police brutality, prejudice, and actually I want to read you this quote that I feel like encompasses a large majority of the book. You hide your whole self away because sometimes you forget you haven't done anything wrong. Sometimes you forget there's nothing in your pockets. Sometimes you forget that to be you is to be unseen and unheard, or it is to be seen and heard in ways you didn't ask for. Sometimes you forget to be you is to be a black body and not much else. Amazing book, beautifully written. I gave it 4 out of 5. Would recommend. Next, I read Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. I read this because I saw that this book made it onto the Women's Prize for Fiction. I have such a hard time saying that award name, by the way. Every single time I want to say Women's Fiction Prize, because that's just so much easier. But I'm pretty sure it's Women Prize for Fiction, which I don't know why my brain just can't comprehend that. Anyways, this book made it onto the long lists, and it's been on my list, my TBR list, for a while, so I figured I would just pick it up. Again, I did a dedicated reading vlog for this book. Wow, I did a lot of dedicated reading vlogs recently. So anyways, I talk a lot, very extensively, about stuff that happens in this book, themes, yeah, all that stuff in that video, so it'll be somewhere. You can go check it out if you would like. This book primarily follows the disappearance of 2 separate women in 2 separate time periods. So we follow Winnie, who's in Saigon in, oh my god, I already forgot, 2011, I want to say. She's Vietnamese American. She was born in the US, raised in the US, but she's in Saigon to, I don't know, I guess discover herself. She's kind of lost. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life, and she wants to be cut off from the rest of her family who are in the United States. She goes missing almost immediately in the book. We know that, poof, she's just gone, and we're like, why? And then also in 1986, I think, we follow another Vietnamese woman named Bin, and she's also vanished. And as the book progresses, and as all these timelines and time skips and stuff happen, we kind of figure out how the disappearances between these 2 women are linked together. This book is heavily infused with Vietnamese spiritual beliefs. There's a lot of mentions of ghosts. That's a huge I don't want to say theme. Ghosts are a huge thing. There's also a lot of snakes, and the cast of side characters is huge. A huge cast of side characters, but you see in the end they all sort of come back to these 2 women, and it all kind of comes together in the end. This is definitely a book about female trauma. It's about the French colonization of Vietnam, how that colonization has changed the land forever, and of course the people. So there's like this smoke, demon in this book that inhabits different individuals in the story, and that smoke demon really only appears after the French have colonized, in the case of this book, a specific rubber tree forest. So you could say that's the irreparable, is that a word? Is that how you say that word? Irreparable impact of colonization, of violence and brutality on Vietnamese soil, and how it changes the Vietnamese people who live in that land forever. Oh, it's also a revenge story, which I like that part of it. Women taking revenge on the men that have harmed them, which we love that. This book is pretty chunky and there's a lot of themes and tidbits and stuff you could really dig into in this book. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because it just takes a long time for all the pieces to come together, and I feel like it could have been tighter, but I don't know, you can also argue that the sprawling kind of widespread expansiveness of the story makes it a journey. Next, we get into the DNF of the month, which is If I Never Met You by Vari McFarlane. I DNF'd this at 50% because, okay, actually let me tell you what it's about first. So we have Lori, she's 36 years old, she's a lawyer, and her long time boyfriend's name is Dan. They've been dating since, I think, freshman year of college, so since they were both 18. That's 18 years, right? 18 plus 18 is 36. Anyways, so everyone's like, oh my gosh, Lori and Dan, their relationship is perfect. They've known each other since college, and look at them now. They both work at the same company, although I think in different departments. And Dan is, I think, a department head or something? I don't think that detail is important, whatever. So, Lori and Dan, they're a thing. And then, at the beginning of the book, Dan's like, I want to break up. I just don't know about us. I want to break up. I think the argument was about Dan wasn't sure if he wanted kids or not, and Lori was pretty, you know, set on having kids, but she was willing to compromise. I don't think she was super, like, she needed to have children, but she was willing to kind of work it out. She was willing to compromise, but Dan was like, nope, it's a deal breaker, I'm out of here. So she and Dan break up. And then, like 2 months after the breakup, Dan comes over to Lori's apartment. He's like, I want to tell you something. She's like, what? And Dan is like, I have started seeing another woman. Her name is Megan, I want to say. And she works at a law firm that is a direct competitor to the company that they work at. Lori's like, what the heck, dude? Like, we've been dating for 18 years. You break up with me, and 2 months after, you're already with another woman. So obviously Lori's like, why the heck are you here to tell me this? Like, why did you feel like you had to come see me to tell me this? It's kind of cruel. And Dan's like, here's the thing. She's pregnant. Up to this point, this is like 40% into the book, by the way. So you're like, okay, but this is a romance novel, so where is our love interest? So as this whole situation is going down between Lori and Dan, there's this other guy in the office who's been described like a couple of times. Like, he's really good looking, he's kind of like a womanizer character. His name is Jamie. Actually, in the beginning of the book, before this whole Lori and Dan situation blew up, Lori saw Jamie at a bar with this other younger woman. She's like, ugh, typical Jamie, like flirting with the young women, like all this stuff. So after Dan is telling Lori about, you know, oh, I'm with this other woman named Megan, she's pregnant, haha, surprise. This whole time, in the 2 months that they've been broken up, they haven't told the people that they've been working with. So like, no one really knows at the office that they're not together anymore. They've just kind of avoided each other this whole time. But now that someone else at a different firm is pregnant, like, there's no way that they can keep it contained. And so everyone at the office starts treating Lori like, oh my gosh, are you okay? They start taking sides, which is really weird. That's one of the reasons why I DNF'd this book, is because everyone at their work just acted like fucking high schoolers. It's just really childish. It seemed really dumb, and like all the gossipy, all the drama, like I wasn't here for it. So how does this relate to Jamie, right? Where does Jamie come in? Good question. At this point, we're like 45% through the book. Finally, Lori and Jamie, they're like talking at the office, and I forget the exact way that this went down, but Jamie's like, hey, want a fake date? The thinking behind this is, for Lori, it'll seem like to other people she's not that sad about Dan being with another woman. And then for Jamie, I forget what his benefit was. They would take photos of themselves, or like have other people take photos of them, where it seems like they're not actively trying to be in the photo. and you know, having them publish and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Lori and Jamie seen in a restaurant. I don't know, the whole thing just felt like high school, and you're expecting me to believe that they're like in their mid-30s and they're still doing these shenanigans. Like, who cares? On top of that, Jamie as a character felt so flat, like so bland. He was literally just there to be hot, and I actually can't think of anything else. I think he's just there to be good looking. Then I read The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and this is about water-breathing descendants of African slave women tossed overboard, and they've built their own underwater society. And in this society, there's one designated individual who holds all the memories of their people, and specifically the really traumatic memories of their past. So the thinking behind it is this one person kind of knows their history, their past, where they come from, and all these things, and then everyone else can kind of live unburdened by that. And once a year there's this thing called the remembrance, where this individual who's called the historian would relinquish these memories to everyone so that they could experience the past and remember their roots and things like that, for I think it's like 3 days or something. And then at the end of those 3 days, the historian would recollect the memories, and yeah, this would just happen once a year. The main character of this novella, her name is Yetu, and she is a historian, and Yetu is particularly sensitive to emotions, to sound, things like that. And so being the historian for her people has been a very tough experience for her. She feels like she's no longer herself because of all the pain that she is in every single day, holding on to these memories. And so at one of these remembrances, Yetu gives the memories to people, and she decides to just dip. She leaves. She's like, I want to be myself. I want to feel like myself again. I don't want to be the historian anymore. And she leaves. So she's swimming away from where the remembrance is taking place for her people, and she eventually finds herself on this little island where she meets humans, like people living on the island. And Yetu finds out that she can talk to them, so they converse. They bring her food because she is super weak from her journey to the surface, and she develops a relationship with one woman in particular who has also lost her homeland. So Ori is the last of her people, and Ori is like, how could you just leave your people behind? Like, how could you not want the memories of the past? Because Ori doesn't have much knowledge of her history, her people's history, and so there's kind of a conflict there. Not gonna spoil the end. This is a really short book. I think it's only like 170 pages or something. It is a novella, and I think if you want a super quick read, I would recommend this one. It's a short little book, but it packs a big old punch, and I think it'll leave you with a lot to think about. And the last book that I read in March was The Mountains Sing by Nguyen Phan Quet Mai, and we follow again 2 women, but in this case it's a grandmother and her granddaughter, and it's about both of their experiences in 20th century Vietnam, which was a very tumultuous period of time. In the present day timeline, which is the granddaughter's perspective, they being the granddaughter and her grandmother, they're waiting for their family to come back from fighting in the Vietnam War. So in the very beginning of the book, we see how the grandmother protects the granddaughter from bombings, from just all the chaos and conflict caused by the war, how they survive. The grandmother actually goes into being a seller on the black market to make money for her and her granddaughter so that they can rebuild their house, which was destroyed by bombings in the war. And we also learn about the grandmother's journey, so before the granddaughter was born, and it's told to us as if we are the granddaughter and we're listening to the grandmother tell us the story. So it's a very direct sort of narration, and the grandmother would talk about how she lost her parents during the French and Japanese colonization of Vietnam, how her entire family was uprooted because of the land reforms that took place during that time. She had 5 children. One of them is the granddaughter's mom, and we see how she had to split up her 5 kids, like put them in different places. This book does not hold back. It talks so vividly about the violence and all the deaths that occur and the trauma. But throughout it all, the grandmother is such, even though she's experienced so much violence and all these horrible things, she's such this figure of light and hope and strength and steadiness, and it's so incredibly, I don't want to say if inspiring is the right word, but it's just so powerful to read about. But yeah, this book does not hold back. I had to put this book down so many times just to take a break from all the horrible things that are described in this book. And I understand that that is definitely a privilege that I have, to be able to step away from these things. I'm not Vietnamese, and my family hasn't directly experienced all of the trauma that the Vietnamese people and people living in Vietnam have experienced in the 20th century. So yeah, I know it's a privilege to just, you know, be able to turn off my brain and not think about it. And coincidentally, in March, I was reading a lot about the Vietnam War in general. So I read Build Your House Around My Body. I was also reading a lot of Ocean Vuong poetry in March, which I'm not done yet, not fully done with this book yet. But a lot of his poetry also centers around the Vietnam War. I was also reading this book, which describes extremely vividly just the horrible things that happened to innocent civilians during times of conflict. So it was all kind of just a lot, a little bit overwhelming. But nonetheless, I think really important to read about. So important to read about this history. My own grandmother passed away recently, last year, and she had experienced a lot of hardships as well in China during the whole revolution. And just her life in general. It was full of perseverance and overcoming hardships, and the grandmother in this story, just the strength that she exhibited, the light that she demonstrated, reminded me of my own grandmother. Oh, I don't want to end it on that somber note, but that is the last book that I read. You know what? The main takeaway is this month, or in March, I read a lot of books about just violence towards women. But you know what? I think in every book that had those themes, there was this underlying idea of hope and bravery and strength and perseverance and overcoming all of these struggles. And I think that's really powerful. You know, we see that in The Deep by River Solomon, we see that in The Mountains Sing, we see that in Build Your House Around My Body. All of it is about the horrible crimes committed towards women. But despite all these horrible things, so many women overcome the challenges that are presented to them, that are just thrown onto them. And it's not, they don't always come out unscathed, but they do overcome it. And that's the reason why many of us, including me, are here today. And I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful that literature like this exists in the world. I'm glad that so many more Asian authors are coming out with books like this. I believe The Mountains Sing was published in 2020, I think, or 2019. And Build Your House Around My Body was published in, I think it was recently, 2021, I want to say. It's not easy to read, and I'm sure to write about these topics, but I'm glad that they are being written. Alright, enough of that. April has already been a way better reading month for me, in the sense that I'm reading a lot more books, which is great. Tell me about some of the stuff that you read in March. The good ones, the bad ones. Alright, that's all from me.